Welcome into the Living Fit podcast. I am Jordan Kunde-Wright, a level 4 master coach, here with my friend and fellow master coach, Mike Silverman. Say hi, Mike.
What's going on, Jordan?
Not too much, brother. On this episode, the first revisited episode of the Living Fit podcast, we're coming in a little bit hot. We're going to dive into two of the questions that we get asked probably more than anything else as high-level kettlebell coaches. I can say the one that I get asked the most is, what the heck is kettlebell sport? I get that all the time because I'm a kettlebell sport coach, and Mike tends to get asked a lot of questions about Turkish get-ups. Tell me the truth about Turkish get-ups. Are they essential or are they overrated? Let's come in with the hot topic first, Mike. I'm gonna put it to you first. So, tell me the truth about Turkish get-ups.
So, Jordan, before we even get into that, I've got a absolutely more pressing question for you that I'm sure that all of our viewers today are going to be extremely concerned about.
Lay it on me.
Can you guess what it is?
No.
What are you drinking?
Oh, I am drinking a lovely sour. I actually am. We're kind of almost to spring here in Minnesota, so I've got a nice Minnesota sour here from Indeed Brewing that I am very much enjoying. It's that time of year for me where I start pivoting away from the porters and the darker beers. I'm trying to will spring into being by switching my beer choice, even though I shoveled 6 inches of snow off of my driveway this morning. How about you? What are you on today?
So I am enjoying a Brothers Brewing Company out of Harrisonburg, Virginia, barrel-aged Belgian dark. And so basically this is one of their anniversary editions. They took it, put it in a bourbon barrel, let it sit there for about a year, and brought it out. It's a little tart, kind of about a 10 ABV. It's kind of delightful, I've got to tell you.
Nice.
So, yeah.
So beers and bells. Cheers, man.
Yeah, oh, yeah, heck yeah, America. So get-ups. I get this one all the time, and I actually get it from people from a whole broad range of folks. People get really passionate about get-ups, and I'm not necessarily sure why there's so much passion about them.
Pavel says.
But whatever, man. It's like everybody brings something to the game, but I'm generally not a big guru kind of guy. But so when I sort of take a look at it, the place I get the why don't you teach get-ups most is when I have people first come into one of my kettlebell clubs. They come into one of my programs. I run regular, recurring, multi-times a week gym programs, and they'll come in there and they'll be like, why don't you ever do get-ups? And the first question I'll throw back at them is, why should I do get-ups? And they usually stop for a second. Well, because it's one of the big six. And I was like, who defined the big six? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, and so like I as a LivingFit coach, right, I've got some fitness style, I've got some CrossFit style, I've got a lot of sport in there, I've got flow, I got rotational movement. And so when I sort of look at it and I sort of line it up inside my head and go, what is the actual payout from this exercise versus the amount of time, mental energy, risk, and ass pain that it's going to take to actually have somebody, especially if they're a rookie lifter, doing a get up. And so when I take a look at it and I break it apart, right, it's just a complex. But the problem is it's got like 60 freaking steps in this complex, right? So if I take somebody and I'm trying to get them through basic stuff like a double-handed clean to get up into front rack for a goblet, and then I say, oh yeah, but by the way, what I'd really like to have you do is do this highly stylized movement with 64 steps that takes a solid 40 seconds per rep to do. Well, in that same 40 seconds, I could do 10 reps of something that's actually useful to that person. Eric St. Onge actually did some good science on the get-ups, and he is straight up, he likes get-ups, right? So he's a fan of the exercise. And he actually did some pretty good work where he did EMGs on muscle activation in different phases of the movement.
All right, pause.
And what he ultimately
break. What does an EMG stand for?
Electromyogram, and if you really want to learn more about those, contact our other LF4 buddy Jesse, because he is Mr. Wizard when it comes to these sorts of things. But basically, it looks like EKG electrodes tell you how much the muscle's doing when you go ahead and fire it off. But what he actually came up with, what Eric's study was largely showing, is that unless you're in really, really pristine form, it's not really all that effective as an exercise. And so each individual phase of it, particularly he was looking at like shoulder activation, like how much it gets different angles of your shoulder. And unless your angles are like just perfect, it's not going to get there. Well, at the end of the day, when you're dealing with either beginner or even intermediate lifters, or as we all know, the more tired you get, the worse your form will tend to become, right? Fatigue breeds bad technique a lot of the time. So let's go ahead and take the rookie lifter 40 minutes into an hour-long workout, and they have just been getting flogged for a solid hour, right? And then we say, hey, now I want you to go ahead and hold your arm over your head for a solid freaking minute in just perfect angles.
Keep that shoulder
drop
packed.
Anything. Get that shoulder packed. Do a one-legged bridge. Swing your freaking leg completely under you. Don't drop it, and then do a lunge. Oh, by the way, after you're done with that, do it backwards. Get back onto the floor without dropping the belt, maintaining good form, and keeping all your angles just right. Bullshit. I'm not going to waste my time with my member doing that. So in the same amount of time, I could actually get them through the pieces of the get up. So I actually like parts of the get up. I just don't like it as a whole movement. It's really it's just entirely too complicated for the payout.
Yeah, I think.
What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think that's kind of mirrors how I feel about it. And this is coming from somebody who at one point I was trying to get to the point where I could do a Turkish get up with a 60 kilogram belt. Like I was working towards that goal. And I got as high as I think like 40 or 48 kilos. I don't honestly even remember. But so I'm not saying it from a perspective of somebody who hasn't done it or hasn't pursued it. I'm saying it from somebody who has done it. And what I can tell you is it's a fun thing to do, and it can be a fun goal to pursue, but to me it is a feat of strength. And there's nothing wrong with feats of strength, right? They're fun, and it can be a cool thing to do, and you get your bragging rights, right? But in the same way that if I'm training a football player, to play the offensive line, bench press is not the ideal choice for optimizing their on-field performance, right? because
you're saying pushing things off of your chest is not like the highest of functional movement.
It's not the highest of functional movement, even though it seems to have a ton of translation to the field, right? But it only has it in one very limited range of motion, and that's not how the game is played, right? So it's one of those things, and that's kind of how I feel about get-ups. They can be fun. They can be a great way to express your strength, but if there's anything that you need that development in, you're going to go to a different movement. Like even when I was trying to get good at get-ups, you know what I did to improve my pressing power? Push press or strict press, barbell presses, dumbbell presses, kettlebell presses, right? Like I was pressing weight much heavier than 50 or 60 kilos because I needed to get stronger in the pressing movements. And the best way to do that was with higher volume, right? And I needed to do it in controlled ranges of motion and in a controlled manner. So I went to other movements. When I needed to get better at the lunge portion of it, right? I worked on just the lunge portion of it and I loaded it more safely. I would do a safety bar squat rack on my back and do lunges with a heavier load on with a safety bar squat rack on, right? So like to your point, I think there's more effective ways to get at those same movement patterns than putting somebody through a complex like that.
Well, and anytime you look at a complex, right, you got to remember that the weight that you're using in a complex is going to have to be set to your weakest lift phase, right? So if your weakest portion is that overhead hold, you're going to go with a much smaller bell, even though your lunge could potentially take 3, 4, 5, 6 times that amount of weight, right? So I've got pretty good lower body development. And, I'll go ahead and pull 500 pound deadlifts off the ground. Not really that big of a problem, right? So, I mean, I can do a 400 plus working deadlift pretty regularly. Which for a guy that weighs about 185, 190 is not bad, right? I'll take it, especially for an old guy. But by the same token, my shoulders are just pure shit, right? From years of abuse and injuries, my shoulders are just garbage. So where do I limit out? Well, I can tell you, I could do 24 kilo Turkish get-ups to pass an exam one time on each arm. And I never really cared to do it again after that, right? From the feats of strength, sure, I kept playing with it, but really what I felt that is I was effectively cheating my strong portions because I had to dumb the exercise down because it has so many different pieces of movement to the weakest portion of my body. And I would have gotten a better payout by just going after that weaker spot and just really targeting it very, very deliberately as its own thing.
So setting aside, a phenomenal specimen athlete like myself, no, I'm just, if you're working with a new lifter, right? Somebody that's coming to you with a brand new, new to lifting weights, and they say they want to do Turkish get-ups, but you as a coach say, no, I don't think that's the right prescription for you. What are the alternative movements that you would prescribe that will get the development in the areas that somebody that they think that they're going to get from a Turkish get up, that you would say this is a better prescription for a new person who doesn't have this capability to do a feat of strength yet?
Yeah, and I get that a lot. That's actually a really very real world thing. And so I'm sure that a lot of my coach buddies and our coaches that are listening to this, our LF2, LF3 coaches that are out there, will say that when you get them in there and they're like, I absolutely want to do this, what I'll say is, okay, that's cool. Let's break it into pieces. And I do this with a lot of lifts. I mean, if you think about it, we do this with almost every kind of lift. We break it into pieces. And so I break parts of the get up out for them to work on it. So I absolutely, especially for my grapplers, my MMA fighters, and also shockingly for my little old ladies who need to get off the floor when they've fallen and they can't get up. I absolutely love Turkish sit-ups. And so the way I'll actually have them start is with their legs out at full 45, just a wide spread, take the legs away from them and have them just hold. I will frequently even start with not even a kettlebell. I'll start with a med ball a lot of the time on their chest and have them just sit straight up, keeping the heels driven into the floor with just wide legs. Get that midsection working and get complete control over that stability without having their legs go flying off of the deck all the time. Once they can do that, I'll usually progress that into having them do it with one leg in that loaded get up kind of position, that one leg pulled back and that 45-degree open feet. But then I'll still have them do it with both hands holding that med ball. Next progression after that is I'll have them do it, but I'll have them do it with a single kettlebell. And I'll have them do just the sit-up portion, right? So I'll have them do that chest press, that floor press, and get that bell up over their chest and sit up with just the sit-up portion of the get-up. Just get up off the deck. And do that 10, 12, 15 reps just to really kind of get that stabilization phase built out before we even start putting any significant weight. I'm talking frequently 8 kilos, 12 kilos, small bells, just to really get them good and stable and see how that works. Another thing that I tend to do is I will actually work with an overhead lunge, and I'll actually do it top down. So I'll actually have them clean one bell to the rack, press it up overhead, even if it's a jerk or a push press to get a bigger bell than they might necessarily be able to strict press up. And then have them just do a lunge while holding that bell overhead. Gets the stability. One thing that's also nice, I tend to like overhead squats as an exercise. I tend to find that they're a phenomenal way to find every single mobility challenge that an athlete's got. And so even doing an overhead squat with a single bell versus going to a full 2 and actually finding that your lats hate you, have them go ahead, squat down with just that one arm up. And even take that into squat to reverse lunge and just start breaking down some of the pieces of the Turkish get-up if you look at it as a complex. What I find a lot of the times is that once I'm able to get them through some of those base pieces, one of two things happens with most of the athletes. They either completely forget they want to do get-ups because they're realizing they're getting really, really strong with just pieces of it. Or they say, let's go for it, and we teach them the rest of the thing. Now, one thing that I find is also a problem. A lot of the gyms I work in have turf or rubber flooring, right? If you wear shorts, and I know most dudes in the gym wear shorts, a lot of the girls wear tights, but most dudes wear shorts. Have you ever ground your knee into AstroTurf?
Oh, yeah.
While you're doing get-ups?
More times than I want to count.
Yeah, it blows, dude. When I was going through,
and then you get the sweat running down your knee into it. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, like when we were doing like 50 of them during one of my hard style certs that I took back in the day, all the guys were like, can I get a dish rag or something? Because we were all like, we had raspberry knees. And so I can only imagine how that feels for a client who's like not expecting it and could pretty much just say F this and walk away from the exercise any given time. I mean, it's like it's their session, and clients will if something's really painful, they're just going to tell you to F off, and they're just not going to want to do it. So,
Why did Mrs. Smith cancel her next 2 sessions? Oh, her knees still weren't healed from the hundreds of get-ups.
Yeah, exactly, because she had rug burn, and her husband thought it had something to do with her trainer. I mean, what?
So, all right. So the $1 million question then is, are Turkish get-ups underrated, overrated, or appropriately rated?
I think they are phenomenally overrated. I know that I'm going to probably get hate mail over this, and
coming in hot.
And yeah, exactly. I'm going to get some comrades very angry right about now. But yeah, I think they're overrated. I think it was pretty funny. I saw, I think it might have been Barbell Physio that was talking about it. It says, I'm not going to say that Turkish get-ups are a waste of time, but if you feel like wasting time, do Turkish get-ups. It's like, I tend to agree. I think it's just better uses of time. I think they've been massively oversold because they look really cool.
Yeah, I would say they're the only reason they're overrated is because there are entire programs based on just this one complex, and it's like, okay, it's not
simple and sinister.
it's not that great. So I would say overrated as well. But I will ask one more follow-up question. If somebody came to you and wanted to do it, like we said, we're not anti-Turkish get-up. If somebody was brand new, how long do you think it would take them under good coaching to go from not being able to perform the movement to being able to do it competently, like to pass a test out or something like that? Like, what do you think an appropriate progression of time would be?
So I think to pass a test out, the good question there is whose test out, right? I mean, there's a lot of certs out there that have somewhat arbitrary weight standards. It's like you have to do everything with the 24 kg, at which point, if you were going to certify them and let them choose an appropriate weight based on their capability, and you just wanted to see, can they perform the movement safely and do they understand the fundamentals? If they move well and there's not a lot of corrective exercise, I'm going to have somebody doing pretty damn good get-ups in about 30 minutes. I mean, that's the reality. 30 to 60 minutes, if that's all we're doing with a weight that is appropriate for that lifter. I could probably have you looking half decent in a half an hour to an hour. I'm sure I'll get hate mail for that too, because, people get puritanical. But if I had somebody who was just a complete rookie, didn't necessarily move well, it might take, it was just a piece of their workout. Like I'll use them as sorbet, right? I'll use them between phases of a session and it might take a few months, right? And like jumping jacks, right? It's like, it's a palate cleanser in your workout. It's to forget what you just did and, get ready for your Metcon at the end, where I just like have you do wall balls for the next 10 minutes and just like leave you in a heap.
Nice. All right. Well, I think we've sufficiently angered at least a portion of the kettlebell community with that first topic. So
I will continue to protect my column.
We'll move it to the second question that we wanted to talk about. So this one is the WTF.
I swear I'm not a hater.
For the audio only version of this, that is Mike holding up his original instructor manual from the RKC. So he is certified in the old school Turkish get up by the old Russian kettlebell challenge standard. So he's not a total hater.
I'm not a total hater. I've just come to different opinions.
So, question number 2, WTF is this kettlebell sport thing, man? What is this?
You mean that thing where guys lift kettlebells and look like a wind dancer in front of a car dealership? Yeah, that floppy ass looking thing?
Something like that.
I'm totally kidding, because Jordan and I are both sport guys.
Yeah, that thing, kind of.
So from the standpoint of kettlebell sport, I mean, it's kind of funny, right? Because you get into these sort of style wars within the kettlebell world, right? Oh my God, I do hard style. Oh my God, I do sport style.
Oh, they call it soft style. They call it soft style. If they really want to troll the sport people, the hard style people will be like, "Oh, you do soft style," and I'm like, okay.
And so but it's kind of funny because like if you talk to any actual Eastern Europeans, right, you talk to some of the Ukrainians, you talk to some of the Latvians, they'll just be like, we just call it kettlebell lifting. Like that shit doesn't exist outside of America. Nobody uses those terms. They're completely fabricated. So I kind of laugh about that. So the way that I describe it, like I said, I work with a lot of CrossFitters and I work in CrossFit boxes and I coach, a bunch of folks in that community as well. And what I typically just tell them is that, all right, so here's the difference. I said, grab a kettlebell. Yeah. Start snatching. They go, yeah. I said, it's for 10 minutes. It's an AMRAP and you only get one hand change. How big a bell you want now? And they're like, what do you mean 10 minutes and I can't put it down and it's one hand change? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, yeah. And they're like, what kind of silliness is this? I was like, well, actually the motto of the sport is die on the platform. So we're going to call it good. And they're like, this is horrible. I'm like, yeah. And then they try, like, you take them through a 5-minute test set and they just go, oh my God, this is amazing. And ta-da, thank you very much. Here's my training contract. See you on Tuesday night. I guess the simplest way I usually describe it to people is you've effectively, if you look at kettlebell lifting as basically everything from below the waist is very similar to powerlifting, and everything above the waist is very similar to Olympic lifting. If you really take a look at how sport kind of jives, it really fits very well with both Olympic lifting and CrossFitters. And the rationale kind of behind it is, you're going to be doing a high endurance, either 5 or 10 minutes of 3 lifts, right? Double jerks or singles. It's totally up to you. Snatches and double clean and jerk called long cycle. And when you get people into this the first time, they look at you and they go, well, this is crazy. Is that all you do for 5 minutes? I'm like, yeah, it's kind of great. Now wait till you go to 10 for full comp sets. And they think you've lost your mind. I integrate sport with most of my clients. What's that? You
have a little bit. Like, let's just be honest. Like, if you decide, if you're to that point in your life where you have decided that going for 10 minutes lifting a weight without putting it down either is a good time or sounds like a good time, like there's something a little bit different about you going on, like just a little bit.
So it's kind of funny, right? So, I teach a hybrid program, right? So I'll teach hinged lifts, I'll teach flow, and I teach sport in every single session that I teach, right? And in all of my clubs. And if you don't mentally divvy it up to people, they just view it the same way most of the folks in Eastern Europe do. It's just another lift. And so they really don't think about it differently. I guess the best hallmark I could put for people when you're dealing with sport lifts is when, in comparison to a hinged lift, right? So if you're looking at those sort of standard hard style or hinged lifts, CrossFit style hinged lifts, they're all basically posterior chain lifts with basically just a single hip hinge and a pop. Sport, kind of the hallmark is there's 2 leg dips. And in all of the lifts, right? So, I mean, you've got a lot of knee bending and unbending happening, right? And so that weight shifting from forefoot to heel, from quad to glute to ham, while, allowing your upper body to not necessarily stay as rigid as you would, and teaching people to get loose when they lift. Is kind of fun. And like when I teach LF2s, in-person LF2s, I will usually take people through just about 30 seconds to a minute of each of the sport lifts, just so they can sort of understand it, right? I mean, it's not something we test them on because it's kind of boutique. But they look at it, and first off, it throws them completely backwards because the leg drive is like a 180 from hard style, right? Like what do you mean my ass goes in the air in the backswing? Yeah. I'm like, no, really, it's like 110, 120 degrees. Your butt goes in the air, and they're like, this is weird, and they go back to hinging because that's all they understand, right? But then when they try it, what they realize is that it works really well, especially for their older clients, because it's much lower impact. It doesn't have that whack that you tend to get, with the hard style swing. And so I usually start them with like sport style pendulum swings. And just two-handed pendulum swings. So here, let me show you a swing a slightly different way. And I go, oh, by the way, you're projecting the bell upward, not forward, like you do in a hinge swing. And they start doing it. They're like, wow. I was like, yeah, you can T-Rex your arms too. And they're like, wait, what? And I was like, oh yeah, just get floppy, man. And they're like, this is amazing. I was like, how's your heart rate? They're like, they're sucking wind. And they didn't even realize how fast their heart rate spiked. And in like 30 seconds of what didn't feel like they were doing that much, they have to put the bell down. You see the hands go on the hips, you see the chest go down. You see them just start sucking wind 30, 40 seconds in. And they're like, what did you call this again? I was like, yeah, this is kettlebell sport. Welcome to hell, buddy. At which point they start booking training sessions. And saying,
only the first one's free. Only the first one's free.
I am, in fact, a crack dealer because I know you'll be back.
Yeah, I think the like you mentioned with the older clients, I think one of the other things too for me that I like about it is because the form is not so rigid, and I will say not quite so dogmatic. It is intention based, right? There is an objective. It is to get the bell from the ground to overhead as many times as possible without putting it down. So you want to do it as efficiently as possible. Well, efficient looks different for everyone based on anatomy, based on their current movement capability, right? And lever length, all of those things matter. And in hardstyle, there's not nearly as much accommodation for that because they're telling you at the top, if you're at the top of the swing, your hips, knees, butt, guts all need to be tight and extended. Everything's rigid, right? Whereas
arms straight out like wooden sticks.
We don't care. Yeah. Like on snatch, I coach a lot of people to do the long arm pendulum, which means really keeping your bell arm as long as possible to really lengthen that lever, lean away from the bell as the force vector goes away from you so that it can go upward, leveraging body weight and counterbalance. But depending on a person's anatomy, right, they might want to keep the bell closer to their body by having a slight arm bend because they have really, really long arms and they need it to, in order to go faster, they need to have a little bend in their arm, or they like pulling from their lats a little bit more than they like pulling from their low back. Like there's all sorts of different things, and you can allow different technique to come in because it's all intention and objective based, and there are fundamentals of how the movement can be most efficient. But there is no one form. No, you don't copy other people's forms. Yep. You find your own form based on application of the fundamentals and how it applies to your body at a point in time. And it will change over time too, because the sport will change you in great ways.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun, right? Because I'll look over at people, especially folks that came out of basically a single rule-based system, right? So people that came out of RKC or SFG or have only done a whole lot of watching of YouTube videos for most of their learning or is kind of self-taught. I'll look at them and I'll say, well, how many ways are there to do a snatch? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Well, there's one arm, there's two arms. I'm like, no, just single bell, one arm. How many different ways? Well, there's there's dead and then there's regular. I was like, young Padawan, let me show you the ways of the force. You sort of looking at him, I said, what would you think if I told you there's like probably about 4 that I can think of that are kind of like your big buckets? And they go, what do you mean? It's like, all right, so you got your regular hinged snatch that everybody knows, right? That hard elbow bend, that big snap, that high pull, that elbow drop under the grunt and punch through the ceiling, right? It's like protecting your column comrade. And it's like, all right, cool. And that's an absolutely great snatch. There's nothing wrong with that. I said, but what if I showed you, it's like, how do you get out of that at the top? And they go, well, I just bend my elbow and flip the bell over. I was like, well, what if I told you just rotate it over, lean your whole body back, and catch your upper body with your rib cage? And they look at you like you've lost your effing mind. And they're like, what? I was like, yeah, seriously, just let gravity drop it. They're like, what? You don't have to throw the bell down? Yeah, why would you waste that energy? And they're like, well, you're on for 10 minutes, man. Let gravity be your friend. And so they'll do that. And I'll tell them, I was like, all right, so here's some basic things. Yeah, I said, same leg drive, cross leg drive, or army squat with a tactical dual leg drive. You go, yeah. I said, And that's all still pendulum variants. And they go, yeah, so if you really want to start playing, you can start going with like toe to heel offsets, toe to midfoot offsets. And they're like, wait, what? And I was like, yeah. So then you start getting into things like long arm, like you tend to go for. I tend to be sort of like long to the middle of the chest, and then I drop my elbow, just because that's just an old hard style habit, and they're like, yeah. I was like, they're all legal reps. Yeah. And they're like, well, what do you mean they're all legal? I was like, you didn't trust your chest. You didn't touch the bell. You didn't stop. You didn't touch it down. You got a fixation at the top. Rep.
Yeah, and then you've got
some judge
even,
clicked the counter
Denisov.
And it counts, baby. That was a lift.
Yeah, you've got the Ivan Denisov, like slightly side to side, like shifting his massive tree trunk side to side and like pulling it with his arm. Like his technique is so different and weird than anyone else's, and yet he's like the world record holder in so many freaking lifts.
Yeah, I mean, and then you get then you got like Dennis Vasilev, who Dennis will basically, he basically does an army snatch.
Yeah.
He's basically straight arm, both legs. He rocks back on his heels in the backswing. His toes are completely off the deck in the backswing. It's like, how do you not fall on your ass, man?
That guy's a great athlete.
Then the guy I first learned from back in like the early Bolt days, Ryan Van Brackle, is a good buddy of mine, another lifter, really very accomplished lifter. Is like his whole thing is like, yeah, you should have your weight all the way out over your toes in the backswing. Your heels can come clean off the ground, doesn't matter, because at that point you're doing a plyo load on your hamstring. You're basically plyometrically loading your hamstring. And he goes, as that bell goes up into the back, that's your eccentric phase, right? That's your amortization. So at that point, what I'll tell people is like, well, you got two dips. Like, what do you mean? I said, dip the nachos. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, as that bell starts to come forward, they go, yeah. I said, bend your knees and drive straight up. And they're like, you've lost your mind, Mike. I'm like, no, seriously, try it. And they'll try it. They're like, oh my God. It's like, I'm like not even working anymore with this 16 kilo bell. And I used to be with hardstyle, I was fighting through 8s and 12s. So it was like, yeah, exactly. And so
you get that, I call it the Bull Durham moment, where in Bull Durham, when he's pitching and he throws a beautiful fastball for the first time and it throws it for a strike. And he goes, oh my God, that was beautiful. What did I do? Like you get that moment when you're doing snatch and you're tweaking your technique or something, and you're like, well, I'm gonna try something. You do it, and then if it flies up there, and you're like, oh, holy cow, can I do that again? Nope, I can't do that again. And then you keep trying to feel that again, because when it
go
clicks,
back for that moment.
Yeah, it's that one good rep that keeps you coming back, right? Like it's that, and then you get a little bit more frequent with it. They come a little bit more, and it is like crack, man. It's the easy drug. It's the gateway.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, it's wild. So like one of my lifters, I know you know her, Sarah.
Beast,
she's all about
Mighty Mouse, man. She's awesome.
Dude, she's about 120 pounds, lanky, about 5'6", 5'7". I mean, absolute beanpole. I mean, like absolute lanky. And she had been coming from really strict hard style. And as soon as I told her, I said, all right, here's what I'm going to have you do. I said, let's try a cross leg drive and maybe offset your feet ever so slightly. Let's just get that toe to midfoot. Just shift your foot back a little bit. And let's go for a cross leg. Just shift across, almost more of that Denisov drive, that cross leg, that glute shift, if you will, like shifting your butt left to right a little bit. And she's running 16s now, but like her very first time out of the chute after we played with that, she's like, oh my God, she pulled rank 1 in her first meet. Yeah. I think it was the Twin Cities Open.
Yeah, it was at my meet. She did 157 reps on the 12 kilo bell, if memory serves right. I didn't look it up, but I think that's about right.
She's sitting at like on a 12, she can pull like 210 to 230 depending on the day right now.
Nice.
And I've put her onto 16s as her training bell now. And she's pulling like 120, 130 on a training bell now with a 16. I mean, she's all of 120 pounds. And so, I kind of laugh when I get folks out there and they first discover those sport techniques. They realize they can put a lot of weight up. Yeah. A lot more weight than they thought they could, but just sort of like, it's sort of let go and let God, right? So
I like David Keown's, Davey says relax. Like I'm talking least mode, not beast mode, right? Like I like that. I like that one.
Yeah, but David's also going to be like the guy who's like, by the way, do you mind if I lift your Prius?
It's just sitting right there. It's just begging to be picked up,
Yeah, it's just like a big rock.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't worry about the Toyota badge on the side. I'm just going to pick your car up.
Yeah,
it just needed to be lifted, right?
Because it was there. Why'd you do that? Because it was there. Yeah,
that's like David. Why did you go lift the Denny stones after drinking half a bottle of bourbon and doing yoga? They were there.
It was Saturday.
I figured why. Yeah, exactly. Sport has some definite characters in it, man.
Oh, for sure. All right. Well, I think we're getting close to time, so we'll let people get back to their days. But so the takeaway, Turkish get-ups are a little bit overrated, but you can do them if you want to. Kettlebell sport is awesome, and there is a place for you in it, whether it's your primary training modality or you just do it for the fun of it. It is
or even just your conditioning routine.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Mike, thank you so much for joining this episode of the Living Fit podcast. We will see you guys next time, and we hope that you are staying strong out there, and let us know if you need any help.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Take care. See you online.